Have you ever been humiliated by your own parent right there in front of a crowd with no way to hide? I don't mean a little teasing or a silly joke. I mean a moment that cuts so deep you feel the floor could swallow you whole. That's what happened to me on a warm Texas evening at my father's wedding reception, surrounded by laughter, music, and champagne glasses clinking in the light of a chandelier. I had walked in thinking maybe, just maybe, my father would see me that night. Not just see me as his daughter, but acknowledge me as the woman I had become after decades of struggle. People smiled, some nodded, some whispered when they saw me. The hall smelled of roses and bourbon. The band played a tune that felt too sweet, too light, compared to the weight I carried inside. And then he stood up, my father. He tapped his glass with a fork, the sound cutting through the music. Everyone turned. The spotlight, soft but steady, fell on him. He smiled wide, confident, proud. My heart hoped for one sentence, one simple phrase that could stitch together years of silence. But instead, he looked at me. He looked right at me, and then looked away as if I was invisible. He raised his glass. "Tonight, I want to honor my daughter," he said. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought, is this it? Is this finally the moment? He turned, stretched out his arm, and pulled Lily close. "This is my real daughter, my pride, my joy, my everything. Do you know what it feels like when your stomach drops into your shoes, when your ears buzz so loud that every other sound fades away? That was me." I heard laughter, claps, cheers for Lily, but it was muffled, distant. I was standing in that crowd, yet I was the ghost no one wanted to see. My father didn't stop there. His smile twisted sharper. "As for others," he chuckled, swirling his wine. "Well, sometimes life throws mistakes at you. But God is good, and he gives us true blessings, like my Lily." His voice rose, proud, booming. The crowd laughed awkwardly. Some guests looked down at their plates. A few gasped. But no one stopped him. No one. I froze. My face burned. My palms clenched so tight my nails dug into my skin. Have you ever been trapped in a moment where you can't move, can't breathe, because every eye in the room is on you, but not in the way you ever wanted? That was me. That was my prison, built out of my father's words. The band stopped playing. The silence was loud. Glasses clinked nervously. Lily smiled, awkward at first, then wider as if she had won a crown. My father kissed her cheek. "This is my legacy," he said. I felt the blood drain from my body. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake the walls until they crumbled. But instead, I stood there motionless, with the taste of iron in my mouth from biting my tongue too hard. What do you do in a moment like that? Do you clap with the crowd, pretend it's all just a joke? Do you storm out, slam the door, and let everyone whisper about you later? Or do you stand there, swallowing the shards of your own dignity, hoping nobody sees you bleed? I looked around, faces blurred. Some eyes flicked to me with pity, others with curiosity, some with cold indifference. And in that instant, I realized something brutal. Nobody was going to save me from this. Not my relatives, not the polite guests, not even the ones who knew the truth of who I was. My father had spoken, and the room believed him. His words hung heavy in the air like smoke, choking me, suffocating me. The toast ended. People raised their glasses to Lily. The band tried to play again, but the notes wavered. My father laughed loud, booming, as if to seal the moment forever. And me? I stayed rooted. My throat was dry, my eyes burned, but I refused to let a tear fall. Not here, not now. If I cried, I'd give him exactly what he wanted, proof that he could break me. Instead, I whispered to myself, "You will not define me tonight. Not in front of them, not ever again. But the truth? In that moment, with all those eyes, with all that silence, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. If you've ever been dismissed, belittled, or erased by the one person whose acknowledgement you longed for, you know the pain I'm talking about. It's not just embarrassment, it's betrayal carved into your bones. That night, I didn't just lose my father's words. I lost the last shred of illusion that maybe he would see me as his own. And that, my friend, was the moment that set everything else in motion. The room still buzzed with his words, even after the music started again. I couldn't stand there any longer. My legs moved on their own, carrying me through the crowd, past faces that turned away, and out into the cool night air. The Texas heat had finally given way to evening, but my chest burned hotter than the sun had all day. I pushed open the doors of the hall, and it felt like stepping out of a suffocating cage. The parking lot was quiet. Only the sound of cicadas hummed in the background, steady, almost mocking. I leaned against my car, my breath sharp, uneven. My father's voice echoed in my head, louder than the music, louder than the laughter. Mistake, not my real daughter. Words that could slice a soul in half. I closed my eyes. For a second, the lights from the hall blurred behind me. My mind pulled me back, fast and merciless, to a time when I was 10 years old. He didn't show up at my school recital. Everyone else's parents were there, clapping, cheering, taking pictures. I waited in the back, holding my flute, hoping he'd rush in late. He never came. That was the first time I realized I couldn't count on him. Flash forward to 17, graduation day. My classmates were hugged by their parents, flowers in their arms. I scanned the crowd, desperate for one familiar face. He wasn't there. I told myself, he's busy. He works too much. I lied to myself because the truth hurt more than the empty bleachers. And then 18, the day I left for basic training. He called me stubborn. Said, "You won't last a week. I left anyway." I had no one waving goodbye at the bus station, just the weight of his words pressing me down. But you know what? I did last. Not just a week, years, decades. Standing in that parking lot, I thought of every night I lay awake in a foreign country, dust thick in my throat, counting the hours until dawn. Every mission that left my heart pounding in my ears. Every soldier who looked to me for direction when chaos exploded around us. I thought of the medals tucked away in boxes, medals I never bragged about because my worth wasn't in shiny metal, but in the lives I fought to protect. And yet, here I was, a grown woman, a decorated officer, undone by the careless words of a man who had never walked a mile in my boots. Isn't it strange how one person's approval, or lack of it, can still matter after all these years? I opened the car door. The dome light flicked on, weak and yellow. My eyes fell on the garment bag draped across the back seat. Inside was my dress uniform, dark blue, crisp, clean. On the shoulders, 2 silver stars gleamed. I reached out, let my fingers brush the fabric. It was heavy, but in the best way, like armor. Have you ever had a moment where your past and your present collide, forcing you to choose who you really are? That bag wasn't just fabric. It was every night of doubt, every bruise, every sacrifice stitched into one piece of clothing. It was the story my father refused to see. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the uniform. My pulse slowed, but the anger stayed, simmering low. For years, I had carried myself quietly, thinking dignity was in silence. But silence had never earned me his respect. Silence had only let him rewrite my place in the family. And now, that silence weighed heavier than the Texas sky above me. I thought of the soldiers who had trusted me, of the letters from families thanking me for bringing their sons and daughters home, of the funerals I had attended, the folded flags I had handed to mothers and fathers who would never hear their child's laughter again. Wasn't that worth something? Didn't that matter? I whispered out loud. You are not a mistake. You never were. The sound startled me. It was shaky at first, but then stronger. I said it again, firmer, as if I needed the night air to hear it, as if I needed to remind myself more than anyone else. In that moment, I wasn't just a daughter my father had rejected. I was a soldier, a leader, a woman who had carved her path through sweat and sacrifice. My hand rested on the zipper of the garment bag. I didn't open it yet, not then, but I knew it was waiting. A promise? A decision hanging in the air. Sometimes you don't realize how close you are to the edge until you're standing right there, toes curled over the cliff, the world daring you to step forward. That uniform was my edge. I took a deep breath, lifted my head, and looked at the hall behind me. Through the windows, I could see the guests laughing, clinking glasses again, pretending nothing had happened. My father's shadow stretched long across that room, but outside, in the still night, I felt mine growing stronger. And if you've ever carried the weight of someone's denial, if you've ever begged silently for recognition that never came, you know the ache. But you also know this truth. Sometimes the recognition you crave will never come. And you have to decide whether you'll keep waiting for it or create your own. I didn't know what I would do next, not exactly, but the uniform behind me whispered louder than the band inside. And deep down, I already knew. I didn't open the garment bag right away. I just stood there in the parking lot, listening to the cicadas drilling the night like a warning siren, palm resting on the zipper as if it were a live wire. My breath slowed. My pulse didn't. I could still hear the room behind me. Laughter trying too hard. A song switching keys mid-chorus, glass against glass. I took out my phone. For a second I stared at the black screen, at my own reflection ghosted over the Texas stars. I scrolled to a name I hadn't used in months. I pressed call. Ma'am? A voice as steady as a metronome. Hey, I said, and my voice came out lower than I expected. I'm outside a wedding hall, my father's. He made a speech. A beat. Bad. I swallowed. He called me a mistake. In front of everyone, another beat. I heard him exhale. You want advice or you want permission? Both. He didn't raise his voice. He never had to. You earned every stitch on that coat. Wear the truth, then say little. Let them do the math. Won't it look like showboating? Only to people who don't know what it costs to be you. I stared at the bag. Okay. Keep it simple, he added. No speeches, no anger, just posture. Let your presence be the sentence. The call ended. The night leaned in. I slid the zipper down, and the smell of wool and starch rose like a memory I'd been saving for exactly this kind of pain. The fabric was cool under my fingers, then warm as it took my heat. I put on the shirt, button by button. Collar snug, edge clean. I pinned the ribbons. Rows I'd never bragged about, stories I rarely told. Shoes polished enough to throw back the streetlight, the jacket last. Heavier than it looked, familiar as my own hands. I checked the mirror on the sun visor. The face staring back wasn't the woman who'd been erased at a dinner table. It was the one who'd carried maps through dust storms, who'd read orders by flashlight, who'd written letters nobody should ever have to write. Pattern interrupt. A thought cut in, sharp. What if walking back in makes you the villain of your own family's story? I answered myself out loud. Then they'll need a new story. I stepped away from the car. Gravel shifted under my heels. Each click on the asphalt sounded like a promise. I could have driven off. I could have left them to their version. But that would have meant letting the lie settle into the floorboards of that room, letting it live there. I'm not built for that. Maybe you aren't either. At the door I paused. I took one breath for the child who waited at recitals that never included him. One for the teenager who left town with a duffel and a stubborn heart. One for the officer who learned how to steady a room without raising a voice. Then I pushed the door open. Sound hit me first. A country tune riding the last bars of the chorus, ice churning in a metal bucket, forks ticking against plates. Heads turned in waves, like wind across wheat. The air shifted. The music didn't stop, it dissolved. A cousin's mouth fell open. An aunt gripped her pearls in slow motion, as if those beads could hold her up. I walked, not fast, not slow. The uniform guided the pace, measured even. A center aisle opened where there hadn't been one. I felt eyes on the silver at my shoulders and heat on my skin. I kept my spine straight, chin level, hands easy at my sides. My father was at the head table, mid-laugh, the kind that comes from deep in the chest and says, "I'm in charge here." And then the laugh died. "Who?" Someone near the cake whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The room was answering itself. I stopped 3 steps from the head table. Lily turned toward me, smile already forming, the kind you give a stranger when you're hosting and you want to appear gracious. Then her gaze climbed. Ribbons, brass, cut of the coat, and she recognized the rank before she recognized my face. Her wineglass knocked against her bracelet, a thin chime. She said it without meaning to say it. "She's my colonel." The words fell between us and rolled across the floor like a dropped coin you can't ignore. The old men from the back stood straighter, instinct pulled them up. The bartender, barely out of high school, balanced 2 flutes and forgot which table they were for. People didn't breathe. They negotiated with their lungs. I didn't look at my father right away. I looked at Lily. Her throat worked. Color drained, then rushed back. White, then pink. Her eyes held mine for a second. The kind of second where 2 lives realize they intersect in ways nobody planned. I gave her the smallest nod, not a threat, not a warning, a promise of fairness. Office matters at the office, not here. Then I turned to the room. Not the ceiling cameras, not the phones already sliding out of pockets. The room. "Good evening," I said, calm, level. The mic on the DJ's table squeaked as his hand missed the volume knob. "I came to wish my father well." I let the sentence stand alone. I watched it land. "I didn't come for speeches, and I won't be giving one." A silence with shape, a silence that held. I pivoted to Lily again, soft enough that only the first rows truly heard. "We'll talk at work," I told her. "On Monday. Bring what you need to bring." Her mouth opened, then closed. She nodded once, sharp, almost grateful. I faced my father last. His smile had collapsed into something hard and narrow. He was calculating. How to laugh this off? How to claim he'd meant something else? How to reclaim the room? I didn't give him the lines. I raised the glass of water on the head table. It wasn't mine, but it didn't matter. "To setting the record straight," I said, simple as a door closing. I took a sip, put the glass down, didn't flinch. Behind me, a chair scraped, then another. Aunt Linda, who never picked sides because sides make holidays complicated, began to clap. 1, 2, 3, steady. The veterans followed, palms flat, shoulders squared, like muscle memory. The applause grew, not wild, not drunken, clean, intentional. It gathered force the way a river does when tributaries join. Someone whistled through teeth. Someone else wiped a cheek with the back of a hand and pretended it was sweat. I didn't bow, I didn't smile big. I let the sound wash over me and kept my posture easy. Lily lowered her gaze and breathed out so hard I saw her shoulders fall. The DJ's finger hovered over play, then dropped. Music didn't come. Even the compressor on the ice machine seemed to wait. My father reached for the microphone. I moved my hand, a small gesture, not to stop him, but to say you don't need it. He hesitated, then let it go. For the first time all night, he looked at me without the armor of an audience. Just a man at a table, eyes wet and angry, because both are neighbors in the same house. "I am," I said, giving him what he hadn't given me, clarity, not performance. Exactly who I say I am. Then I turned back to the crowd. Enjoy your evening? I stepped away from the head table, and the room parted again. Hands reached. A palm brushed my sleeve. A thank you landed close to my shoulder, warm and unexpected. The door was 20 paces. Each pace loosened a knot inside me I didn't know I'd been hauling for years. At 10 paces, I heard chairs shift. At 5, my father's breath draw in, like he might say my name. I didn't stop. Not out of spite, out of mercy. The moment had already done its work. Outside the night was the same, but I wasn't. The cicadas still drilled. The heat still smeared the horizon. But the air entered my lungs differently. There's a way the world feels when you refuse to hide from it later. Not easier, never that, but truer. If you've ever needed one small act to reclaim the room where you were made small, you know this feeling. It's not triumph. It's not revenge. It's alignment. Bones clicking back into place. I leaned against the car and looked at the hall. Through the glass, the applause hadn't quite died. It rose again, softer now, as if the people inside were clapping for themselves too, for having witnessed something decent. And because we're here together, you and I'll say this to you. When a lie tries to write your story, you don't have to wrestle it in the dirt. You can just step into the light and let the truth show up with you. If you've ever done that, or if tonight you needed a push, tell me below. Tell someone. Your voice might be the hand another person needs to steady their own. Stay with me for what came next. I thought the night would end in the parking lot. A breath. A steady walk. A drive home under a wide Texas sky. But the world has a way of reaching into your quiet and turning it inside out. By the time I took off my shoes and set the uniform on its hanger, my phone was already lighting up like a pinball machine. At first it was 1 text, then 6, then a stack I couldn't swipe through fast enough. Is this you? Ma'am, is that you on TikTok? Proud of you. You okay? A link flew past. Blurry video, harsh lighting, the hall in a grainy frame. And there I was, walking in, the room freezing, Lily's voice cutting the air. She's my colonel. Someone had filmed the moment. Of course they had. 10 seconds can outrun 30 years, and that clip sprinted. It hopped from one account to 20, then 300, then thousands. A caption tried to catch it. When your dad calls you a mistake and the colonel shows up. The comments arrived like hail on a tin roof. Queen. Military or not, families are messy. Imagine shaming your own kid like that. She's using the uniform for attention, I cried. Not kidding, I cried. I put the phone down, then picked it up again. Don't we all? You tell yourself you don't care what strangers think, and then a stranger's sentence wobbles your spine. Another clip surfaced, longer this time, shot from the side, the angle catching my profile and my father's jaw hardening. Someone slowed the footage, someone added piano, someone added fire emojis. The algorithm did what algorithms do, fed outrage to outrage, fed hope to hope. By noon the next day, a compilation stitched the angles together. My entrance, the clapping, the toast that wasn't a toast. A creator with 1 million followers paused the clip and said, "Let's talk about dignity." Another said, "This is why boundaries matter." A third wagged a finger at me and asked if I understood appropriateness. I went for coffee and came back to a voicemail from a reporter who pronounced my name wrong and wanted a quick human moment. I deleted it. I opened my inbox and found 3 emails from people I hadn't seen since basic, 1 line each, proud of you. We needed that back then, standing with you. Then I saw it. The post that made my stomach tilt. My father's public Facebook page, set to Friends of Friends, but nothing stays contained anymore. His words were neat, careful, the way a knife can be careful. Last night was supposed to be about love. Some people made it about themselves. He didn't write my name. He didn't have to. In the comments, a neighbor wrote, "He deserved his happy night." A cousin chimed in, "She always had a flair for drama." Another cousin replied, "You weren't there when she paid other people's rent in college." 10 replies bloomed beneath that, half of them kind, half of them mean, all of them certain. I closed the app. My hands wouldn't stop moving. I cleaned the kitchen. I reorganized a drawer that didn't need reorganizing. Still, the buzz, the hum, the digital chorus found cracks in the walls and seeped through. You know that feeling? When the noise isn't loud, but it's everywhere? By afternoon, someone had scraped public records and stitched an explainer. Where I worked, how long I'd served, ranks and ribbons guessed at by people who didn't know them, but said them with confidence. I watched the screen and felt oddly separate from it, like watching a character I recognized but didn't quite know. The first call from the base came near dusk. Not a reprimand, not a warning, a check-in. "Ma'am," the voice said, formal but warm. "We're seeing the chatter. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, and meant it, and also didn't. "Let us know if you need anything." A pause. "Public affairs is tracking. Public affairs." 2 words that taste like metal. It wasn't trouble, not yet. It was attention. Attention can metastasize. My phone kept landing face down on the table and jump-friending the ceiling again, like a fish thrown back into the river and refusing to swim off. I skimmed, scrolled, stopped, scrolled again. A woman from Manitoba wrote, "My dad didn't show up to my wedding. Seeing you stand tall helped me breathe." A man from Liverpool, "Mine called me useless at 13. I'm 41 and still hear it at night." A Marine's mother from North Carolina typed, "Thank you for the way you spoke to my son when he was scared. He never forgot." I didn't know her, but I remembered him. Between the soft messages were sharp ones. Power trip. Stolen valor vibe, even if it's real. Why bring rank into a family room? Because truth deserves a place at the table, someone answered for me. Arguments bloomed like mold in a damp corner, fast and fuzzy and hard to scrub out. Then a local blog posted a headline that made the blood pound in my ears. "Colonel crashes father's wedding to make a point." The story quoted a source close to the family. You can guess who. The source said I'd always needed the spotlight. That I couldn't let a simple celebration be simple. That I marched in like a show pony. The article ended with a question, performative, sweetly barbed. Should military status ever be used to settle family disputes? I stared at that sentence and felt the old heat crawl up my neck. Did I settle anything? Or did I refuse to be erased? There's a difference. There's a canyon between revenge and recognition. People online don't always care about the canyon. It's easier to build a bridge out of assumptions and sprint across. By evening, my father had given a quote to a radio host who loves a messy story. He didn't say I was a mistake this time. He didn't have to. He said, "Some people can't separate work from family, and let the host do the rest." I made dinner and ate 2 bites. I fed the rest to the trash. I stood at the sink, hands braced on the counter, and told myself a simple sentence, the same one I ask you to consider when the crowd decides who you are. Not every voice deserves your attention, but some do. I went back to the phone and reread the note from the Marine's mother. I read the one from a nurse in Ontario who had watched a patient's father belittle her in front of the staff and said she drew a boundary the next day because of the video. I read a message from a teacher in Bristol. My head of department talks over me. Tomorrow, I think I'll look him in the eye and finish my sentence. Maybe that's what viral does at its best. It turns one private moment into a public mirror. You look in, you don't always like what you see, and if you're lucky, you fix your collar and face forward. The sun slid down. The house dimmed. I set the uniform back in its bag, careful, deliberate. Somewhere between one notification and the next, my inbox pinged with a subject line that straightened my back. 4 words, polite, crisp, official. Request for brief conversation. I didn't open it yet. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, but because I wanted to hear my own voice before I let another voice in. I stepped onto the porch and let the night settle around me. The cicadas were loud. The stars didn't care about trending tabs. Here's what matters, I whispered, to myself and to anyone who needed to borrow the sentence for a while. You don't have to defend your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. If you've ever had a private wound go public, if you've ever watched strangers judge your life from a 10-second window, tell me how you held steady, drop a line. Someone scrolling at 2 a.m. might need your words more than you know. The email subject line looked harmless. Request for brief conversation. 4 words, clipped and polite. But you know how a room can go quiet without anyone asking it to? That's what happened inside my chest, I clicked. The message was from headquarters, professional, neutral. Could we speak today about recent public attention and context? It felt like being handed a teacup that might be porcelain or a grenade. Before I could reply, my phone rang. Base number. Ma'am, the voice said, steady but careful. HQ would like you in D.C. for a discussion. Tomorrow, if possible. Discussion about what? I asked, although we both knew the answer wore a tuxedo and sat under a chandelier 2 nights ago. Public Affairs and Legal will brief. We're here to support. A pause. Travel arranged. 0700 wheels up. I stared at the uniform bag hanging on the closet door. Isn't it strange how fabric can weigh more than concrete when the world is looking? I packed light. Dress blues in the bag. Comfortable shoes in case the halls are longer than Pride. I slept in fragments, like someone kept turning the radio dial inside my mind from static to talk radio to silence and back to static. Morning came gray. I moved on autopilot, coffee, keys, gate ID. The sky over the runway looked like paper someone had erased too hard. On the plane, I sat by the window and tried not to scroll. Failed, scrolled anyway. My name was everywhere and nowhere. Colonel at wedding. Daughter in uniform. Boundaries. Attention-seeking. A YouTube thumbnail used my face with the kind of red arrow that promises blood. Another creator said, "Here's what she should have done." Isn't that a chorus you've heard before? Here's what you should have done. The wheels touched down at Reagan, D.C. Humidity hugged my lungs. A sedan from HQ met me at the curb. The driver didn't talk, I didn't either. Buildings slid by like a stack of file folders, brown, severe, labeled by the weight of their secrets. When the Pentagon appeared, massive and matter-of-fact, I felt something loosen and tighten at the same time. That's what home can be when your home is duty. Inside, the corridors owned their own weather, fluorescent light, polished floors, 1,000 footsteps pretending not to echo. I checked in, clipped on a badge, and followed a captain whose stride said no time for detours. He guided me through the wedge and into a small conference room with chairs arranged like chess pieces. 2 on one side, 3 on the other, a glass of water set precisely at each place. Public Affairs opened. "Colonel, thank you for making time." "Thank you." As if time had been my choice this week. She slid a folder toward me. "We're monitoring." Inside were screenshots, headlines, comments printed in black and white so they looked more official than the voices they contained. "Our interest is to ensure your actions remain beyond reproach," Legal spoke next. "You wore your uniform in a private venue during a family event that became public. We need clarity on intent and perception. Intent, perception. 2 words that don't shake hands unless you force them." I said what was true. I did not plan to wear it. I put it on to counter a lie in a room where silence would have made that lie official. I did not solicit filming. I did not invite commentary. I made no speech. Noted. "The lawyer's pen didn't squeak," it whispered. Still, appearances can be interpreted. Public Affairs leaned in, palms tented. We're drafting a posture. The narrative right now is split. Some see dignity. Some see showmanship. We can't shape their mouths, but we can guard the institution. The institution was what I was guarding, I said, quieter than my pulse. There was a knock. A young major in a suit stepped in, phone in hand. "Ma'am, sir, local outlets have picked up a quote from a family source. It's circulating." He turned the phone so we could read. The words were clean and careful, like a scalpel. Some people can't separate their job from a private moment. My wedding was hijacked. My father's sentence, scrubbed for broadcast. I could hear his breath between the lines. Pattern interrupt. For a heartbeat, I was not in that room. I was 17 at the bus station, his back already turned as I boarded, the unspoken clear. Find your own way. I did. And here I was, still finding it, even when the road passed through rooms with government seals on the wall. Back in the present, legal clicked a pen. "Colonel, we're not accusing. We're asking for your account so we can protect the service and protect you. But the press will want more than no comment." "Do you intend to speak publicly?" I thought of the viral clips, the red arrows, the strangers who had typed their own scars under my video at 3 a.m. I thought of the Marine's mother who had thanked me, the teacher in Bristol who promised herself she'd finish her sentence. "No tours," I said. "No interviews. If a statement is needed, it's short, clean, respectful. No gasoline on any fire." Public Affairs nodded slowly, relieved and disappointed at once. The way one nods when drama denied is also crisis de-escalated. "We can work with that." "Another item," the PA officer added, voice tightening by a thread. "A columnist claims he received messages from your father implying you stage-managed the entrance." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the table as if the wood might offer an easier answer. I breathed in, out. "I didn't stage anything," I said. "I walked into a room where my name had been made small. I corrected the record with presence. That's all." The meeting slid into specifics, timelines, who knew what when, what I wore, what I said, what I didn't say. Nothing glamorous. Just the slow knitting of facts into something that could stand up without shaking. At the end, legal capped the pen. "We'll review. You may be asked to submit a memorandum for record." "I'll write it," I said. Public Affairs escorted me down the hall to a quieter office for a media posture brief. There were bullet points on a screen. Integrity, respect. No personal attacks. No speculation. I could have written them myself. The officer asked, "If pressed about your father, what will you say?" "Nothing that sharpens a wound," I answered. "I'll say families are complicated and I'm focused on service." He nodded as if I'd chosen the right door in a maze. Good. During a break, I stepped out into a corridor lined with photographs. Leaders standing at podiums, hands on shoulders, flags lifted by wind. I stopped at one. It wasn't anyone famous, just a simple ceremony, an older woman pinning a ribbon onto her daughter's chest. Their eyes held the same pride. I felt that old ache rise, not envy, not anger. Empty space mapped by a simple picture, my phone buzzed. Another notification. A podcast wanted me to tell my side. A TV producer offered a car in 20 minutes. A journalist asked, "Do you regret wearing the uniform?" I typed and erased replies that sounded like speeches. Then I put the phone away. Not every invitation is a door you should walk through. Late afternoon, I met with one more official. Someone whose job title is mostly initials and whose office smells faintly of coffee gone cold. He asked few questions. He watched my eyes as I answered. When we stood, he said, 30 years, Colonel. That's a lot of steady counts. It wasn't absolution, it was oxygen. Back at the hotel, the city hummed under the window, traffic drawing red threads across the night. I took the uniform out of the garment bag so it could breathe. The room was quiet in that heavy DC, way where every silence feels intentional. I poured water, sat at the small desk, and started the memorandum they might request whether or not they'd asked for it yet. Facts first, then context. Then the sentence that mattered most to me. I wore the uniform to stand in truth, not to perform it. As I wrote, a thought kept circling. Small, persistent, inconvenient. Can 30 years be unraveled by 30 seconds? I didn't answer it. I let it hover above the paper, a question mark with its own gravity. If you've ever had to walk into a room where your life might be reduced to a single moment, you know the taste in your mouth right now. It's metal and memory. It's fear and backbone. It's the quiet before someone else decides the shape of your day. Tomorrow would be what it would be. Tonight, I folded the uniform along its seams, set my alarm, and told myself the only prayer I trust in halls like these. Do it clean, say little, stand steady. If you've got a word for me, a way you held your ground when the ground tilted, drop it below. Someone is reading, knuckles white, waiting to borrow a piece of your courage. The room was colder than the hallway. That's the first thing I noticed. Not the seal on the wall, not the nameplates lined up like a row of verdicts, the cold. It sat on my skin and made the hairs on my arms stand up under the jacket. A long table. Microphones with red dots asleep until someone woke them. A glass pitcher sweating onto a napkin. 3 members facing me, 1 on each side of the chair in the center, 2 on either end like bookends that could crush a story flat. "Colonel," the chair said, nodding just enough to be polite. "Thank you for appearing." "Thank you for the opportunity," I answered, voice steady. It surprised me a little, the steadiness, like finding a handrail in the dark. To my left, a recorder clicked on. A soft mechanical sigh. The counsel in uniform leaned to the microphone. For the record, date, time, location, purpose. Review of potential misconduct related to the wearing of uniform in a private venue that subsequently received public attention. I could hear my heart, but only as a presence, not a sound. The counsel asked me to state my name and rank for the record. I did. The red dot blinked to life on my microphone. It felt like a heartbeat too. He asked about the event, the relationships, the sequence of actions, facts first, dates, times, no adjectives. Then the questions turned a shade darker, not hostile, not friendly, just heavy. Why the uniform? I didn't look down. I didn't look up. I held the space between. Because a claim was made in a room of witnesses that erased my name and my life. Remaining silent would have made that claim official. I corrected the record with presence. I did not make a speech. I left promptly. Could the correction have happened in another way? Maybe, later, privately. But the damage was public in that room. The correction needed to exist where the damage did. A pen tapped. The counsel glanced at the chair, then back to me. "Were you aware you were being filmed?" "No. Do you believe that your actions contributed to the filming?" "People film everything," I said. I did not ask them to. My mouth was dry. I took a sip of water. It tasted like the pitcher had been rinsed with cold air. The legal advisor to the panel lifted a page. "We have statements from witnesses describing your demeanor as calm, controlled, professional. We also have statements from others who felt your entrance shifted the power in the room." She glanced up. "Do you acknowledge that?" "I acknowledge reality," I said. "Presence has weight." I kept mine as light as I could. Someone scribbled. A jacket creaked. A chair leg scratched the floor and then paused, embarrassed. The chair lifted a hand. "We're going to hear from a few individuals," he said. "For context." He nodded to the door. It opened, and the first witness stepped in. A senior NCO I had served with in 3 different theaters. He looked at me once, not long enough to say more than "I see you," and then he faced the panel. "Describe Colonel Collins's leadership," the chair said. "Calm under pressure," he answered. "Consistent. Doesn't speak to be heard. Speaks to make things clear. Would you characterize her as attention-seeking? He didn't even blink. No, sir. They thanked him. He left. The second witness was a civilian. Public affairs. She described the arc of the video online, the spikes, the demographics, the split sentiment. She did not color the data with judgment, just the numbers. When she finished, the chair asked, "In your assessment, did the members' actions constitute a deliberate attempt to leverage uniform for personal gain?" Her answer was lean and exact. No. The popularity of the content appears driven by narrative dynamics outside the members' control. The third witness surprised me. He was older, his hair silver at the temples, a suit that didn't advertise itself. He was introduced as a retired officer and ombudsman for a veterans group. "We've received hundreds of messages," he said, voice low, "many from service members and families who felt seen by the posture of restraint. We've also received concerns about optics. It is our position that the members' conduct, as documented, did not bring discredit upon the service." He left the way he entered, like a door closing softly. Then came the thick part. The counsel read a statement attributed to a family source. The phrases were careful the way knives can be careful. Hijacked a private celebration. Conflated rank with respect. Performed rather than honored. "Do you wish to respond?" the chair asked. I could have said a lot. I could have let old pain gallop into the room and trample the table. Instead, I let the breath anchor me. Families are complicated. I won't litigate mine here. I will say this. I did not raise my voice, I did not insult anyone, and I did not request an audience. I walked in, corrected the record without a speech, and left. Silence gathered like dust on a windowsill. No one moved to wipe it away. Finally, the chair adjusted his papers. "Colonel, you may make a brief statement before we recess." I had prepared 12 versions in my head and on hotel stationery. None of them stepped forward. I went with the one that fit inside a closed fist. "I've spent 30 years learning that doing the job quietly is louder than any microphone. I wore the uniform that night to tell the truth about who I am, not to ask for applause. I respect the uniform too much to use it as a weapon. I also respect it too much to hide it because someone else misnamed me." The chair nodded. The red lights clicked off. We stood. The panel filed out, a procession of neutral faces. The door shut. The air changed, like a room exhaling. I sat, hands flat on the table. The counsel across from me unclenched his jaw. "You did fine," he said, almost a whisper. "Now we wait. Waiting has a taste tin, dry paper, old gum under a chair." I took inventory of the room because counting things is easier than counting doubts. 1 pitcher, 2 glasses, 3 microphones. 4 framed photos on the wall. I made it to 11 staples on the bulletin board before the door opened again. "Colonel," the chair said. He didn't sit. Neither did I. "We have reached a preliminary determination." My throat tightened without my permission. "The panel finds no violation of applicable regulations as to intent or conduct." He paused there, not for drama, but for precision. "We will recommend no adverse action. We will also recommend a guidance memo to reinforce best practices for all members regarding uniform wear at private events. Optics matter." I heard a sound. It took a second to realize it was me exhaling. "Questions?" he asked. "No, sir," I said. My voice stayed in the room. It did not run around knocking over chairs. He extended a hand. We shook. 30 years, he said, not unkind. Steady counts. After they left, the counsel lingered. "You'll get the paperwork," he said. "There will be chatter for a while." "But chatter burns out when it doesn't find more fuel," I said. 2 words, simple as a closed door. Outside, the corridor looked different even though nothing had moved. Isn't it wild how your eyes change the furniture when your shoulders put a weight down? The fluorescent lights were still fluorescent. The scuffed baseboard still scuffed, But I walked lighter. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief, not the bubbly kind. It was the quiet hum of alignment. Public Affairs waved me into a side office for a last review of posture. "Short statement?" she asked. "Short," I said. "We drafted it together. I respect my family's privacy and my service's standards. I did not intend to make a private moment public. I remain committed to serving with integrity and restraint. No barbs. No subtext that would breed more subtext," she nodded. "We'll release only if necessary." In the lobby, 2 young service members waited for an elevator. When the doors opened, neither moved. "Ma'am," one said. His cheeks were pink. "Permission to say—" He stopped, searching for a word that wouldn't sound like hero worship in a building that dislikes the word hero. That was "Get steady." "Thanks," I said. "Steady wins more than speed." He smiled at the floor, as if the floor had told a joke only he could hear. Outside, the sky had shifted from flat to layered, clouds stacking like folded blankets. I stood for a minute at the curb and let the air touch my face. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't read yet. The sedan pulled up. "Airport?" the driver asked. "Eventually," I said. "But first, 5 minutes, I needed a bench. I needed the feel of wood under the back of my hands, and my feet planted on something that didn't scroll. I found a spot under a tree that looked like it had watched 1,000 arguments end and 1,000 beginnings start in their place. I called no one. I opened nothing. I let the wind move my hair and the sound of a plane pass over like a long sentence with a clear period. The question that had hovered above every page since the wedding, can 30 years be unraveled by 30 seconds? Didn't disappear, but it changed shape. Maybe the better question was smaller and harder. When 30 seconds tries, will you hold to the 30 years or hand them over? I stood, feeling the answer in my knees before I felt it anywhere else. I walked back to the car. The driver nodded without asking what happened. Some people can read a posture faster than a headline. In the airport, a woman in a business suit caught my eye across the security line. She mouthed thank you. I didn't know for what. Maybe not letting the story teach the wrong lesson. Maybe forgiving her a line to borrow when a room tried to take her name away. On the plane, I finally read a few messages. One from the teacher in Bristol. "Finished my sentence today." One from the Marine's mother. "He stood taller at dinner." One from an address I didn't recognize until I did. "Lily, Monday works." "I'll bring what I need to bring." I closed my eyes and let the engines turn the day into white noise. If you've ever survived a room that could have broken you, you know this part. The victory isn't loud. It's a seatbelt clicking. It's your shoulders lowering by an inch. It's the knowledge that you told the truth without sending shrapnel into anyone else. If any of this met you where you are, if some room is trying to rename you, leave a word below. Not a speech, just a word. Steady, boundaries, enough. Someone will see it and borrow it. The way you once borrowed courage you didn't know was yours. I flew home with the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for music. No victory playlist. No "you did it" anthem. Just the engine hum and the steady thrum in my ribs that said, "You stayed clean." When the wheels touched Texas, the cabin sighed like a single animal. Seat belts, zippers, phones waking up. I waited my turn, nodded at the flight attendant, and stepped into heat that smelled like sun-baked asphalt and hot metal. Back at the base, the gate guard glanced at my ID and snapped to. "Welcome back, ma'am." Simple words, but they landed deeper than the plane had. Buildings I'd walked past 1,000 times looked the same. Beige paint, low roofs, flags shouldering the wind. Familiar scuffs on a familiar hallway. My office smelled like paper, coffee, and the ghost of yesterday's briefing. I set the garment bag on the rack and took a breath. Not a heroic one, just the kind that reminds your body it belongs to you. On my desk, a stack of memos waited like well-behaved children, training schedules, maintenance reports. A draft of the guidance memo the panel had mentioned. Best practices for uniform wear at private events. I read it twice. It was fair, clear, necessary. The kind of thing that prevents storms from pretending to be surprises. I added one sentence. Members are urged to correct misinformation with restraint and through appropriate channels. Restraint isn't silence. It's direction. A knock. Ma'am? Torres, my exec, leaned in with a clipboard. We moved the squadron sync to 1400, and Public Affairs asked if you approve the statement if needed. Short and respectful? Short and respectful. Approved. He nodded, then hesitated. We hung this up while you were gone. He pointed to the corkboard. A handwritten note taped in the corner. Steady winds more than speed. Someone had drawn a small anchor beneath it, not fancy, just 2 lines crossing where they needed to. I laughed without sound. Good message, I said. The day found its rhythm. Meetings that didn't care about my personal life. Briefings that measured fuel, flight hours, and weather, not sentiment. It felt right, like a river remembering its path after a rock fall. By noon, my shoulders had forgotten the elevator pitch for pain. At 13:30, my phone buzzed with one line from Public Affairs, holding, no release required. The noise had already begun to eat itself. That's what outrage does when you stop feeding it. And then Monday arrived, the way Mondays always do, on time, unglamorous, useful. At 900, there was a knock I'd been expecting. Lily stood in the doorway with a manila folder hugged to her chest. Civilian clothes, hair pulled back too tight, eyes doing the math between embarrassment and resolve. Ma'am, she said. Not sister, not Sarah, just ma'am. The way the job writes us into each other's sentences. Come in, I said. Door open is fine. She took the chair across from me and placed the folder on the desk like it might break if she set it down too fast. Her voice had lost the shimmer I'd heard at the reception. Now it carried sand. I brought what you asked for. Emails, the checklist. My notes on the supply discrepancies, thank you. I kept my tone plain on purpose. Work tone. The safety rail tone. I scanned the top document, then looked up. We'll go through all of it slowly. Correct what needs correcting. She blinked back water that didn't fall. I'm sorry about that night. I let the apology land. I didn't rush to catch it. I'm not here to collect apologies, I said. I'm here to do the job with you. She nodded, shoulders loosening by half a bolt. We got to work. Dates lined up with receipts, signatures matched to shipments, mistakes sorted into what could be fixed by process and what needed discipline. No grand speeches, no hidden knives. Just 2 people building a straight line through a crooked pile. When we finished, she stood to go and paused. For what it's worth, she said, you were steady. Try to be, I answered. It pays better than spectacle. When she left, I stared at the closed door and felt a soft shift inside my chest. Something like forgiveness, but not the kind that excuses. The kind that releases. Maybe that's what true honor does. It refuses to turn pain into fuel when water will do. That afternoon, I walked the hangar. The smell of hydraulic fluid and sun on aluminum is a vocabulary all its own. Crew chiefs called out status. A young airman ducked from beneath a wing, grease on his cheek like war paint. Ma'am, he said, a little out of breath. The replacement parts delayed, but we built a workaround within protocol. Show me. He did clean, clever without being cute. I signed off and felt the ordinary satisfaction that no headline can counterfeit. Doing the small right thing in the small right place, that's a life. On my way back, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the preview. I said some things on the radio. My father. I didn't open it right away. I took it outside instead. The sky had traded heat for a pale, forgiving blue. A trainer lifted off the runway and climbed, nose crisp, wings steady. sunlight sliding across its back like a hand smoothing creases from a sheet. I watched it until it was a dot and then a memory of a dot. Only then did I read. I said some things on the radio I shouldn't have. I don't know how to be better at this. You looked like your mother when you stood there proud. I didn't know where to put that feeling, -D. Old ache stirred, then settled. I typed 3 words that were true and sufficient. I heard you. I didn't add, I forgive you, because forgiveness isn't a trophy you get for mailing in 3 sentences. I didn't add, try again, because I'm not a guidance counselor for his conscience. I heard you meant I wasn't a wall. It also meant the door stayed on its hinges. Before sunset, the guidance memo circulated base-wide. No drama, just clear lanes for future storms. Public Affairs emailed a note, coverage declining. Positive comments outweigh negative by a wide margin. Recommend no further action. Legal added a line. Thank you for your professionalism. Somewhere, a columnist drafted a piece that never ran because the fire had gone out. Somewhere else, a kid scrolled past my video to watch a dog ride a skateboard. The internet returning to its baseline chaos was a gift I hadn't known I wanted. I drove home with the windows cracked enough to let the evening in. The uniform hung in its bag behind me, quietly existing like a lighthouse coat after a storm. Ready, sturdy, unspectacular. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and didn't brace. That's new. Not disbelief, not pride. Just a peace that didn't require witnesses. At the house, I made dinner I actually ate. I washed the pan, wiped the counter, and stood at the sink while the faucet hissed and calmed. I thought about the sentence I wanted to leave with you. Not a slogan, not a clap line. The sentence I believe when the house is quiet and the world has moved on to its next appetite. Here it is. Honor is not the noise people make about you. It's the truth you agree to live, especially when no one is watching. Does that help you where you are? Maybe your storm isn't a wedding or a uniform. Maybe it's a boss who speaks over you. A friend who keeps you small because your growth scares them. A family member who says your life is a phase. Whatever it is, here's a practice that costs nothing but courage. Write 1 sentence you can stand on, not defend, stand on. Mine was simple. I am exactly who I say I am. Find yours, whisper it. Then build your week around it. Pattern interrupt before we close. A question I wish someone had asked me sooner. If the person you're waiting to impress never clapped, would the work you're doing still be worth doing? Sit with that longer than your notifications. Let it shape the next boundary you draw, a final thing. I won't pretend the internet loved me unanimously. It didn't. It never loves anyone that way. But a message came from Manchester that I've kept in my pocket. A father wrote, I told my daughter I'm proud of her today. Your video made me realize I'd assumed she knew. I read that and thought, if all this mess delivered that 1 sentence to that 1 kitchen, I can make peace with the rest. So I'm back at my desk. The day's last light pulls a gold line across the floor. The hangar doors are closed. The base quiets to its nighttime heartbeat. Tomorrow will be meetings, coffee, fuel counts, a new airman who needs a straight answer, and some email I'll delete because not every voice deserves space in your head. But some do. Yours, when it's telling the truth. Your friends, when it's offering courage. Your own, when it's steady rather than loud. If someone has ever tried to rename you, if you've had to stand up in a room that hoped you'd sit down, leave a word below, not a speech. Just the word you needed when the room went quiet, steady, boundaries enough. Say it for yourself. Say it for the stranger who will read it at 2 a.m. and realize they're not alone. And if this met you in the middle of your own storm, take this with you tonight. You don't have to perform the truth to live it. Walk in it. Let it fit your shoulders. Let it guide your pace. The world will keep talking, let it. You've got work to do.